After all this, you still...
I still want that ghastly yes, and you had better deliver.
This is Greenhouse Gaslighting, a free and independent podcast discussing society and culture with a left-wing, down-to-earth perspective. If you've ever wanted a deep dive on the issues, but felt like the bar for entry was too high, then you're in the right place. So I'm certain that listeners are going to be looking at this like really at a time like this. Y'all are doing a Gundam episode. And we kind of hinted at it. And in some ways, I think it is kind of perfect to bring up a Gundam film that is trying to achieve something from a bygone era of Bush style or Bush era mech anime and its kind of conceptions at a time when they tried to half-ass Iraq war style manufacturing of consent. Something just very prescient about that to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's spot on. It kind of in the spirit of that too. It's very similar to what we're saying with develop in Iran. This is like it's the same thing we got in the 2000s, but probably worse. And that's where we're at today with none other than Mobile Suit Gundam SEED Freedom.
Now, probably if you've heard the episode that we did on Seed, I want to say it's almost 2 years ago now. Seed had pretty much been a series that been a product of the 2000s, like the early 2000s especially, and had been kind of left to its own devices. I know there was like the Astray manga. You had some stuff like Stargazer, and then there is a new Eclipse manga series that's coming out too now. But then with the remaster that came out, I want to say a few years ago, I don't know if that directly led to them to pick up this abandoned Seed movie that came out last year, or if it was always in the works. And you did an amazing write-up of this film that I'm kind of relying on to recollect my thoughts, because it's literally I have not rewatched it since we saw it in theaters last year. And first of all, it feels like a lifetime ago, just between
It really
this year.
does.
Oh my God. And like what's been going on in the Gundam space has been crazy since, with how Witch from Mercury was received. We have the G-Quux beginning film that came out, and then the series is almost about to come to a close this week, right?
Yep.
So it's been a crazy couple years for Gundam fans, as I can see, but also to see what it's grown past and how it has this ability to artfully invoke past aesthetics to good ends, as we've seen with things like G-Quux. But then with this, I can't even call it uncanny valley. Like, yes, there is aspects of that 2004 art style I don't really like, but to kind of recapture that aesthetic with modern animation technologies, like you still use like 3D models for like the mechs and stuff. It's insane. It was as entertaining to see as it was just like, why did this come back? I don't know.
Well, and it's gonna come back again because they have announced end of last year Gundam SEED Freedom 0, which is a prequel to this. Presumably because there was a lot of elements in this movie that, and from what I understand, they're a little bit more fleshed out in like the manga or light novel supplemental thing. But there's a lot of aspects in this movie that this movie is very unapproachable. If you were not already familiar with this setting. And it's interesting because, kind of, the sort of joke kind of going in, right, was you had, Gundam Seed, which was very much trying to riff on what they did in the original 0079 MSG series. You had Destiny, which was Kind of, sort of, but not really. Zeta. Um,
Yeah.
so the idea here was like, okay, we're gonna go CCA. But the thing is, like CCA, and I was like going to ask actually, did when you took Sky to that, had she actually seen anything leading up to it?
No, so I think prior to that, it's everything. Well, actually, okay. She passively was watching Zeta when I was watching it, and she liked it, but she wasn't actively watching it. So that's about all the exposure she had to Gundam.
Sure. And so, that kind of gets to the main point with it, which is that like that movie came out with a shorter span of time, about a decade between it and the original series, right?
Right.
And I think it stands alone on its own, like pretty well. It gives you a flashback of the relevant context for why Char and Amuro hate each other. You see the scene where Lala dies. In a flashback, there's some exposition that explains things. This movie really doesn't do that, and it kind of like it's weird where like tonally and everything, it felt like it was ripped right from the 2000s. But also like it kind of flannerizes a lot of its cast in weird ways. The way it portrays characters, I think, in my write-up, I was particularly critical of um how it portrays women.
Yeah.
Especially, which is like it's interesting because like the one aspect of character design that was changed was that like the women are given much more exaggerated lips.
Yeah.
And it looks very weird. It looks like they all received Botox, in the lead up to this movie, and they're all in their 20s, or younger in some instances. So there's there's no reason for them to have received Botox. Um, but they have this weird look to them. I wonder, and I was like wondering if like tonally did this like was this deliberate, right? Were we really trying to like, all right, we have to make the women and men look different because we are like our stories that they are different in ways that I think are very
Oh my
problematic.
God. No, I mean that's probably the best place to start, right? Because Cosmic Era is trying to adapt Universal Century for the sci-fi tastes of the 2000s, of the Bush era, right? And I really have no context for the cultural moment in Japan at that time, right? I really only have a footprint for my childhood memory of it in the United States. So
Sure.
from what I can gather, right, is they shift the basis away from like mystic, kind of the scientific side of psychics with new types, with genetic modification, which was a big cultural touchstone
Yeah.
in that era, with stuff how they drop coordinators. When it comes to the mech technology, they're actually really exploring battery technology and moving away from like nuclear proliferation. Why they went that route, to be honest, I'm not 100% sure, but it's an interesting
Kind
angle.
of.
And
I mean,
then,
I guess it fits with, sort of that war on terror era, right?
yeah, of like disarmament and like that
Yeah.
whole concept and weapons of mass destruction, which again, like we can get into how Kira Yamato is kind of a defense of liberal interventionism, a la Samantha Power, but that's a digression. That's a digression for that this time. But I think one thing that should be said about Tomino and some of the other writers on the original Gundam, right, is, and again, Tomino is an insane person. His interviews are some of the most eclectic things you'll read, but he has a very primitive articulation of a feminist worldview, right? It's still grounded in a very masculinist framework, but it is one that he felt at the time was something he wanted to communicate to his daughters, right? And when he speaks about the early success of Gundam, it was initially with female viewers.
Yeah.
The male viewership that kind of makes up nerddom now, or especially in the case of Gundam, only really came in once Bandai started to popularize the merch and you had the first round of Gundam models, right? So Gundam has always had this somewhat limited and still very much a product of its time, but it has had this focal interest on female characters in the context of a patriarchal worldview, right? And then what Seed does is it takes that treatment and in a very postmodern way, sorry to use that term, flip it on its head and make it regressive with over sexualizing them.
Yeah,
I don't
I
go
was
ahead.
gonna say Seed is like very Gooner pilled, like
Yeah,
for like okay, I would argue maybe compared to everything before it, but I mean definitely like I think like the Tomino era, right? Like it's like because I mean even you just watch if you have never seen it, just watch the Gundam Seed opening, right? You've got naked women in like silhouettes, boobs flying all over the place,
pretty
like
in ways that
it
don't make any sense. Like 2000s jiggle physics stuff that's like not
yes.
only misogynistic, it's just unrealistic.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm like, it's like, the Tomino era. I'm like, when I think of the women from that, right? I mean, Katarzyna from Victory is like probably the most like, okay, yeah, like we're like, and that's like at the very end of that series.
Yeah,
Right? Because before that, she's not really like this picture of like fan service. But at the end, I'm like, okay. But again, like Tomino had a point with that. He had a point with the bikini babes that she was using to target the Victory Gundam at the end of Victory. It was all kind of this, object, but like, even like other scenes where it's like, yeah, you might have seen women in compromising positions. It felt like, it was never really like for like the sake of eroticism in Tomino's works, which is ironic, like, because I mean, we've read, I mean, heck, our Char's counterattack review, right? Like, we
right.
read the thing where he's talking about Nanai, that he designed her as a character that would get Char's dick hard. But she's portrayed, I mean, yeah, there's a little bit of a sensual scene between them, but it's classy.
Yeah, definitely nothing X-rated going on there, and it's also the kind of thing where it's like, I guess when you're a screenwriter, if from a script writing perspective, you think about the characters' relationships in this context to an
Sure.
absurd extent, but in the context of what's shown on screen, that's nowhere near. And I think in the context of UC, right, it's less to do with the sexual act or the sexual relationship than the power dynamic or interactions between those characters, and even
Yes.
the way new types function is somewhat of a commentary not just on human relationships but on it's the only other work that explores it to a similar a degree, although with different conclusions, is something like Evangelion, right, where the idea of reaching out to someone is inherently scary and will almost always result in pain, whereas in Gundam, even if it is painful, there is a hope that you can transcend disagreement and strife. That's the pitch I've seen it as. And then with Seed, it takes all these ideas and just hits the Gooner button on them. And it's good you brought up Victory, because I had been rewatching, or sorry, I finally watched Victory. I want to say, yeah, I probably finished it earlier this year. And between like how Victory's plot points are set up, some of the weapon technologies or weapon implementations and strategies kind of come in a really ham-fisted way in Seed. And it also just feels like some of these late UC Victory era designs got recycled through this 2004 art style. And not to criticize that whole cloth, right? Like stuff like Transformers Armada, for example. That's stuff I grew up on in this era.
Yeah.
So this is the mech design style that I grew up with. I really do like it. I won't say that I dislike the art style for the mechs or even the mech fights, but they are based in being overpowered and overdesigned.
100%.
So I'm trying to think about what else. Do you know if it's true that like they scrapped the Seed movie and just used those assets to make the Double O movie? And I know next to nothing about that timeline.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like I don't it's a rumor that has circulated through the Gundam fandom for years. And I think a lot of it is that Awakening the Trailblazer, which is the Double O movie,
Hmm.
the quintessential antagonists in are aliens. And for a lot of people that came out of left field, frankly, it had been kind of alluded to a little bit where like they talk about in that show like one of the whole points of like these innovators, which are kind of the analog of new types, there more or less same psychic ability, same ability to communicate and understand one another, that the purpose of that was to open dialogue with like aliens.
Right.
So like the fact that like you have a movie that like I think that movie is sloppy and not the best executed in a lot of ways. But the fact that you have a movie where like the culmination of it is that the main protagonist communicates with aliens to make the conflict stop. That felt on brand for that show. Um,
Mhm.
I think aliens would. I mean, other than the fact that I know there was like the space whale fossil in Seed as like a background like thing that comes up once for some reason. Um, other than that, that would have felt really out of left field for this era, especially considering what the cosmic era timeline is exceptionally guilty of. Because even when I was talking about like how like Seed Destiny was sort of a Zeta analog, but not really. Like there's definitely elements of it there, but it doesn't go all the way. The reason it doesn't go all the way is that it decides to like recycle itself.
Mhm.
And this movie decided, what if we did it again? What if we recycled the same thing again? To the point that we have, I mean, we'll get into the plot eventually. I mean, maybe now is a good juncture to do that as well. But like, there's so many elements that are just ripped right from the existing series. The framework is still like, because it's like, well, like, it's very much like how like movies in like the early 2000s, like when they kept doing sequels for like Jason Voorhees, like it was just like how what's
Yeah.
the level for which like the core of this movie is the same, but how do we like spice it up and get the audience excited again? So like we'll take him to space, we'll do like all this other random stuff, and that's very much what it feels like it's at play with this movie, right? You have this whole like genetically engineered coordinator versus the natural conflict. Well,
Right.
way to amp that up is we create super duper coordinators, the Accords.
Yep.
Um, and then like, but like, like even that as like a twist, it doesn't really work because then they just like still break it down to like just there's another coup in Zaft, which we'll get into because I think it's important for another character's development. Um, and the coordinators are like, oh yeah, these are our natural allies. So let's
It's
reignite
insane.
the
It's
same
all
war.
insane. But and here's a crazy thought I've been having, right? And you can tell me if I'm off base with this. Is Seed just the Francis Fukuyama interpretation of Universal Century?
Except like I would say no because like well I, mean, I guess maybe in some way well yeah I would say no because like the idea of Francis Fukuyama, like even though like yeah we make fun of the end of history, the idea is that like history is hitting like this new frontier, and this is just like we have hit history. History is going to recycle itself over
Right.
and over and over again.
Oh my gosh.
Within the span of what 4 years, I think is the length of the cosmic era from like Seed to this movie.
Right. And it's like again, just like the idea at play for all this, it just doesn't because we're gonna keep talking about how like Seed keeps reusing UC ideas and puts them in really ham-fisted implementations, but it's really centered on this very selective reading of justifying intervening and jumping into conflicts that you may have worsened through your intervention. And it's not even the nation state doing it. It's like if the UN peacekeeping forces had unilateral power and the best weapons. And the only way
Well,
I can think of this is like if the Titans were justified.
kind of, except the Titans are still somewhat beholden to the Earth government
Yeah.
because they are a branch of that. Whatever the what are they even called by the? It's not Foundation's the other group.
Compass.
Compass, yes. Before they didn't have, they were like the three ship alliance, but now it's like it's instituted as Compass, which is like weird because like they're better equipped than everyone other than the new villains who miraculously have tech. And then one of the things too I was thinking of when you were talking about like the recycling of UC, one of the things that like Destiny was bad about this, where like originally when Seed came out, like the Jins and Gundam and like the Strike Gundam were
Right.
probably the most reminiscent of like the Zaku and RX-78 since the originals.
Yeah.
Then Seed Destiny came around, like, what if we just put in the Zaku? What if we just put in the Guff? What if we just put in the Dom? Spruce it up for the 2000s. This movie continues that trend. You get the Gelgoog, you get the Zagok, which, other than the fact that it's got this hidden gimmick that it's housing the Immortal Justice Gundam in it,
Right.
or not the Immortal Justice,
The
it's
Infinite Justice. Oh my
Infinite
god,
Justice
even the names are
Spec
crazy.
2. Oh, the names. I mean, like, I wrote about this in that review too, where like
Let's
just like
see.
because all of the tech stuff, like let's get into. But yeah, anyways, you've got the Gelgoog, you've got the Gion, you've got the Zagok, but then you get to like the bad guy suits, like the Black Knights, which I mean they try to do this as like, oh, they're twist villains, even though they kind of gave it away in the opening anyways.
Right.
Um, but God, the names of these. Rudro.A, or the Rutro, as we're going to call it for the rest of this.
It's such a ham-fisted thing because like when in UC when they make
Shivi.A.
yeah, because it's supposed to be Shiva, like the
Halrig.A.
Hindu. The names are so crazy because it's supposed to be like
I'm just going
the
to call the
Hindu
other one
god
Cholera.
Shiva, and like the Rudras are like the different like aspects or whatever. But like it's
Okay.
such a bad invocation of it. Like if you don't get the reference, you don't.
Yeah, and like I mean, so like I mean, you do get the reference. Is there anything aesthetically about them or their faction that like evokes?
Like Hindu mythology? No, not at all. It's the same thing with like even in like the initial Seed series, right? They used
Yeah.
a lot of like Valkyrie references, like you had the Lohengrin, the Tannhauser, and all this stuff. It has nothing to do with Germanic folklore.
Well,
A
and
lot of these weapons. Oh, go
we
ahead.
keep it up to the weapons. Yeah, the Cholera has the hyper impulse gun Adro Anzi, beam shield Amaratat, rock claw Morsis Mortis.
Yeah, just invoking it, but with no like stylistic invocation or anything like that. In UC, at least it was known that like they just named it whatever came to their heads. That was like a known fact. This they were trying to be smart, and in reality, it's just like you grabbed a thesaurus.
Well, and in UC, like, and I mean, there's vernacular in UC, right? There's jargon, there's Minovsky particles, but other than that, like, I mean, Seed, and I was like thinking about that watching this because we watched it in the theater subbed, and I had like noted this in my review where it's like I don't know if this just like took me out of certain things where it's just like you have all of its bullshit jargon, right? Vulcans are Seawees or whatever. You've got the
Yeah,
Tannhauser, like just everything has to be like we have to say what it is, right? You can't just shoot someone. You have to say what you're shooting them with. Um, and it's like it's so annoying. And like early on, I thought the action in this movie was really jarring and bad. Like that first big, or not like there's the first fight where they're just like up against some jobbers from Blue Cosmos or whatever. But like the one where like they've incited Kira to commit an international incident through brainwashing.
yeah,
Which again, like the villains, the Accords have these like super special powers. All of their mobile suits are equipped with like this extra new shielding that like deflects beams. And all of this is like super selective in terms of when it works. Because it works early in the movie when they need to like get a win and our good guys need to have like some type of comeback. But once they're like in the phase of the comeback, this stuff just stops working.
which
Or they
is
just don't even try.
this is a conversation we've had offline once, right? Where it's like the suspension of disbelief in mech anime is how sometimes the sci-fi is implemented. And
Sure.
in UC, that's like the invocation of the Minovsky particles, as you were saying, right? Is like
Yeah.
the way they work actually helps to suspend your disbelief, and it creates like this justification for why fights function the way they do, because there's limited visibility in comms and
Yep.
space. And then in Seed,
And you have to
and this
rely
is
on visibility.
you have to rely on visibility, and also like there's a technological arms race in UC where like it takes probably 20 to 30 in university years to see different forms of technology come out, whereas in Seed this conflict is probably the duration of 1 year, and they have technology that only comes around by like late UC. in terms of just beam weaponry and armors and all this stuff. And there's something to be said about
Well,
how
and to your point on like when you did the victory thing, right? Like beam
yeah,
shields start getting used in Seed Destiny. They took like 40 years before they become standard place in UC.
right. Like in UC, the beam weaponry was so cutting edge that just having it gave the Federation the edge
Right.
when they had the first Gundam.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the way that these fights are structured and even how these mechs are suited out, right? They have these ultra cool, ultra slick designs, especially like the heroes. The Black Knights, I don't know where they were going with this. They don't really fit into anything we've seen for any timeline. Even for something like Zanscare, which you could say the Accords draw inspiration from, Zanscare still had
A
a
little bit of
kind of
Crossbone Vanguard more so, I would say. Like they have like the very much like that
mm,
elitist. I guess I could see both. It's just that Zanscare had a very like kind of like quasi-feminist edge to it, where it was like the idea of like we have to have like the motherly nature of a woman in charge, whereas this, I mean, I guess there's a little bit of that, but they don't really make it clear. It's just that like the Accords are supposed to be uh the rulers, and two of them are supposed to fuck.
yeah. It's really ham-fisted in that same way, and the mechs don't really take any stylistic cues. They're just
Which
generic.
I'm okay with, but they don't look better for it.
Well, didn't your brother call them like the Playmobil Knights?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
it just seems so accurate because like they're very uninspired, and even when the Calrea comes up, it just seems like an evil version of the Mighty Strike Freedom, right? It's the same
Yeah.
gold wings with like the beam wings or whatever, and it just
And they're both like all white.
yeah. Which, and again, I'm just remembering the last review we did on Seed Destiny where it's like the Strike Freedom is already so extra. It's already
Yeah.
the most extra suit that they've come up with, and the Akatsuki's right there, right? So then to have a new version of it that has even more gold and like a samurai sword is insane. It's insane.
The samurai sword felt like it was just there because it was like, you know what, Astray is pretty popular, right? Let's just give it the red flame sword. Like that, it was just like, because I mean that's like what the Seed Freedom was, or the Strike Freedom was to begin with, right? It was just it just took like what are like the popular things from past Gundams. Let's just copy them over. And then the Mighty Strike Freedom, which I hate the name. Again, like
Yeah.
I hate most of the names in this. It's like, well, like funnels are no longer in, so let's kind of, I don't know, let's give it like Force Lightning. Why not?
Pretty
Um
much.
and there's like weird stuff too, and we'll get into like how like the battle like plays out at the end and whatnot. But there's like again, like there's that initial part of the movie, like they meet like Foundation, who is like this hippy dippy kingdom that wants to accomplish everything they do. Actually, like let's rewind before that. I think like the
Yeah.
key to this movie is the relationship between Kira and Lacus.
Yes.
I don't know. I'm trying to remember how their relationship was written the first time around in the series.
It's always been super weird because basically in the first seed, Lacus is betrothed to Atherin,
Yeah.
and somehow they do wife swap. And it was cool
Yes.
that they did it because Kigali is Kira's sister, and that's
Yeah.
gross. So Atherin
Yeah.
and them can get together. And then
Well,
Lacus.
for some people that might not be gross, as we'll talk about.
Oh Lord! Oh no! Oh my God! Um, and then for it's good that Kira and Lacus get together because every time Lacus notices Kira, she gives him a new high-powered mobile suit, which is its own. And she's like supposed to be this weird like again, her being like a pop idol is really like a sign of the times this came out in. I don't think that has the same purchase among Gundam fans. Like you don't see that come up, but that comes up heavily in
It was
Cosmic
very big
Era.
in Macross, which is I think what they were trying to emulate.
Okay.
I think
That's
every Macross series has had some type of pop idol as like a major
okay.
character. So
Okay.
she was pulled right from that conceptually.
Okay, that's interesting. And then I think yeah, Destiny him and Lacus are still there, but then you have the Lacus clone that's running around causing chaos. Somehow, even in this high-tech era, there's still like false flags happening every 48 hours that no one
Yeah.
knows how they got across. And then in this movie, it's like, oh, remember when you cucked Psy with Flay, Kira? What if that happened to you? And the way that like the Accords have this power to mess with coordinators' memories, it's not like, because
And
again
they
the
even mess
invocation,
with anyone's memories because they even mess with hers a little bit.
right,
And
right, and
and
it's,
it turns out, spoiler alert, she's an Accord too.
yes,
So one of the things that like I've never really liked in Seed was the whole like Kira is a super coordinator, right? Like he was
hmm,
genetically engineered to be better than everyone. It seems like the creators kind of took that to heart as like a criticism and like, well, what if what if he wasn't actually better than everyone? There's actually a super Ubermensch, which are the Accords, and Locus is actually one. We'll retcon her entire history. She was created along with Orphe, who is this guy who, the fact they were created by the same person, I would assume makes them siblings, but he wants to marry her and rule the world because they've been genetically engineered for this. Locus Klein has been genetically engineered to rule the world. A character who has, as of this movie, three, count them, three coups thrown on her by the
hmm,
age of 20.
hmm,
Like, I know, nature versus nurture and whatnot, but considering that, like, the nurture side is very much like what defines Cosmic Era, you genetically engineered the supreme, the ideal ruler of the world as someone so unlikable in universe, but also super likable. But, the fact that she's had three fucking coups thrown on her would indicate she doesn't exactly have popular support.
right. And it's also like we've talked about these different coup attempts and how like Zaft itself, the political factions don't make a ton of sense within it, but then because of that, this is like Last Jedi level, just shoehorning in a new plot thread that we're all, and like it's to such an absurd extent that it really does break the suspension of disbelief. Um, this additional plot with what was it, the Destiny Plan and Chairman Durandal and all of that
So
mess.
and it's weird the way it's done in this movie, right? Because it's continued right from Seed Destiny, where it was like his plan was basically I don't remember what specific dystopian novel originated, but basically that everyone would be assigned like a job according to like their like personal aptitudes, and they would do that, and that would be how society functions, right? Is that everyone is like designed for a purpose, and there would be no conflict because you would all like kind of society would like satisfy its own needs, it'd be self-perpetuating.
Dude was trying to do the caste system in like the 24th century. I don't know how he didn't see that one not work, but here we are.
Right, and so, like, throughout this movie, you hear, like, the speeches and whatnot, and I don't know if this is just to, like, get his voice actor into, like, a Gundam, because it's the same, voice actor as Char, right? I don't know if
Yep.
that was the purpose of this. It kinda feels like it was. Um, and Kira is, like, obsessed over it. Not because he's, like, endorsing it, but his whole job is to commit, world peace, and he can only do this single-handedly, right? We see this in the beginning of the movie where there's this armed intervention thing where he has to like be the guy who does everything, right? He refuses to let anyone step in and do anything else. Even though you have other competent pilots there, you've got Shin, you've got all these other characters, but he has to be the one who bears the front of this. He also has to be the one to, watch them, like the engineers work on the mighty backpack for his strike free. He's not doing anything. He's just watching it. And they show this as like, I don't want to, it's like weird because it's like it feels like you were supposed to be saying that like he is neglecting his relationship with Locus, but that's not how it's portrayed. It's portrayed that she's like this dutiful, they're not married, but dutiful partner who just like understands the burdens that he is going through. She's running the whole political scene on Zaft at this point until she gets another coup. But she's the one she's making dinner for him. She's making his favorite meal, which he's too busy watching the engineering room and then listening to the Mind Comp, aka the Destiny Plan, over and over again in his sleep. She's like she does all this stuff for him. So then when it seems like when she's briefly mind controlled to go with the Accords, which there's another funny line with that too, because Orphe is like trying to like get Kira into like that cuck chair where he's just like, oh yeah, like you're not good enough for her because, and I quote, you can't even bring about world peace.
It's insane how it went from like Shinzo Abe level, please don't neglect your wife, we need to raise those birth rates, to immediate like, you didn't succeed in your plan to do world peace through war crimes. You got to kill yourself, man.
Right. Like it's and he like I think he tells her that. It's like, "Oh, like Kira's not right for you." He can't even bring about world peace. Like as in like, like this basic thing. It's like, it's like he can't even do the laundry. Like he can't even do, bring about world peace. It's like the same caliber thing. Not that he can do his laundry either. Like it's weird where it like portrays this, then like Kira gets all sad when she leaves. Not that she like leaves him. She's just under mind control. She doesn't openly reject him, and he's also a war criminal at this point because he just started an international incident by bombing some people.
That subject of the international incident too, right? Is like we've talked about in the Cosmic Era, these different factions like are willing to do atrocious war crimes.
Yeah.
Just to get like 5% of a tactical edge. They will like nuke their own facilities. They'll
Which
wipe
they do.
out.
They knew Foundation nukes its own capital.
Yeah, like nuking an entire city and or like region. That was very much like classic Cosmic Era, but also it's like it plays into like this weird like sinking nihilism that makes it not fun to watch, which is like all this invocation of mass suffering and the horrors of war for a plot that is already contrived to begin with. There's always something that feels kind of cheap about that.
Yeah, and it's especially when it like keeps happening over and over again. And I think there's like, I mean, far be it for me to say there's too much politics in a thing, but there's too much like there's too many factions in Seed, like in its universe. Like there's so many like because like you see maybe it simplifies it at times, but like you have like the Federation. There's not like you don't hear like, oh well, like there's a chance that I don't know, Japan will secede from the Earth Federation. But here it's
Right.
like you have like all of these countries that are still like autonomous, they still exist. The villains, as I said, they nuke their own capital as pretext for them rebuilding both Death Stars from the prior Seed series. Which again further enhances how cyclical this particular
Right.
franchise is, right? There was 2 super weapons that were ostensibly a Death Star at the end of Seed and at the end of Seed Destiny, and the new villains, their plan involves using them both again. Or maybe they were just using Requiem, and Messiah just happened to be there until, again, the ridiculous technology of here. The Mighty Strike Freedom has the Hyper Mega Bazooka from the Double Zeta, right? It's got the head cannon, except it's like very tiny. Nonetheless, it cuts Messiah in half. This huge asteroid base, it just cuts it in half with one shot.
It was basically like that last act of the movie was a toy ad. And you can say that about any Gundam series, low key, right? But there's just something about like
I did describe the final fight as like I can't remember the exact terminology, but I basically said it was like this is like the best part of the movie and also probably the dumbest part.
Yeah, because it's like we've seen a lot of the mobile suits in this movie before. Like, of course, there's like the new Gyan, the Gelgu Menace, and the Zagak that's hiding the new and improved Justice, right?
Right.
Maybe there's a couple like design changes here and there, but these are fundamentally
they're all like Spec 2.
Spec 2, right? Which is like a recolor, maybe a new mold, and then like a new play set to attach, which again just it feels very much like the 2000s where it's like you got your base Optimus Prime and then you got the expansion sets for it. And it's just the same thing. It's like you can get the high grade Destiny, and now you've got space boots to put on it, basically. Which
Well, you've
I'm
got
sure.
the high grade Destiny in particular comes with the Zeus armaments, which it uses for like a frame of the movie.
Literally, and then the Akatsuki gets in it for some reason, and it's
Yes.
like, oh my god, it's all so insane. And
And I think the Akatsuki also recreates its shot of like blocking the Death Star. Or no, it didn't block the Death Star before. It just blocked like a laser in front of the Capitol. This it just like straight up just no sells a Death Star laser.
and then like in another Glup Shido, you had like the two Zaft officers. What were their name? Isaac and who's the guy with the
Oh,
Buster?
Jerka.
Yeah, Jerka. And it's like,
Yeah. Well,
it,
they've got their new versions are. You've got the what is their name? Add them. It's the
what is it? The Dual
Lightning
Blitz
Buster
and the Lightning
and the
Buster.
Dual Blitz. Yes, because it's got the Blitz Gundam stuff.
But then they brought back the meteors just for
Yep.
this.
Yes. Which I mean, the meteors again, another thing where like cyclically, the meteors are used at the end of Seed. They are ignored for the entirety of Seed Destiny until they are brought back again for the same final.
And it's like it's very much paint by numbers because in the initial Seed run, the final battle felt a lot more desperate. One, because you had three factions fighting one another. Um, you didn't have a sense that
And no one has
the,
ethics either at that point, right?
no one
Like
has ethics. So like everyone's like fighting.
Story, and like the whole story there, right, is that they are all like, the idea of like we're not going to use nukes in war anymore. All of that is gone.
Yeah.
We are just outright we're going to destroy each other. That's what adds to the desperation of that battle. Whereas everything else has since felt extremely paint by numbers.
Exactly. Because yeah, it's like they come with these new like weapons and all these like this high-tech stuff. They have no idea that it's going to work in the end. But then come see Destiny, all these like new cutting edge suits while everyone is in like a grunt suit.
Yeah.
We kind of know how the fight's going to turn out. They pull out their same super weapons. And then this final one was like three new super weapons and all the classic ones.
Yeah.
Get your playset today type deal.
Well, I don't think they didn't even bother making a new super weapon, though. If you do go on the Gundam wiki, if you go to like I think the mechanics under like the Seed Freedom, it will have Seed Freedom mechanics. There is an entire section for super weapons.
Oh my god.
I don't see it anymore. I saw it earlier. It's definitely there. You've got Requiem, you've got a lot of the same stuff. But like the suits themselves, as I said, like the fact that like a one mobile suit can just, put its shield up and no sell, one of these weapons. The fact that the Strike Freedom can just shoot an entire asteroid in half with one blast. The fact that it can wipe out a whole with a weird force lightning thing. Like, it's like, what is the point of these massive super weapons if a mobile suit can accomplish the exact same goal in this timeline?
Which, again, not to invoke UC, although this is just going to be the real like way to talk about this, right? In UC, it's very heavily shown and implied that you can pull up with outdated technology and still win through skill and strategy. Yeah. And in this, it's kind of like our heroes are always on the winning side. Like the only time a battle is hard fought is because millions of faceless drones have to fight you. And that's the only thing that makes it tough. Otherwise, like they're not evenly matched to deal with you until the villain of the moment shows up. They have different tech. They wash you, and then you come back after getting your inspirational speech with hyperpower technology, either hinted at before or like just got pulled out of someone's ass. There's no idea of like piloting as a skill in anything in Cosmic Era except in Astray.
The closest you get with it in this movie is that like Shin, which well, let's get into his character too, but like when he gets the Destiny spec too, he says like, like, oh, like this is a suit that he's actually used to use. So he's not gonna get fucking dog walked again. That's like the closest you get to skill being there. But also, like, he gets like treated like shit in this movie.
Oh my god.
They have another character in Agnes who tries to cuck Lacus by, like, hitting on Kira, and Kira rejects her. But she also like makes fun of shit, why can't I think of her name? Shin's girlfriend. She makes fun of her for being with a lesser man, which I joked about in the that I was like, that's impossible because there's no way a man in this timeline is lesser than a woman.
Oh
But
my god.
yeah, Luna Marie, yeah, that was her name.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
then the way like Shin like stops their like mind control, mind reading powers is that, and I quote, they see nothing in his mind. Until, like, I mean, yeah, you do get a point where his ex-girlfriend, who died in Sea Destiny, where she, like, her ghost comes and like eats their souls or whatever. But like throughout the movie, they just constantly throw shade at him of him being like an idiot. And I'm like, this wasn't like a defining trait for him, right? Like some people in like the fandom like called him an idiot, but that was mostly just like, oh hey, he's like following the bad guys. Like, what an idiot. The same way you do with like other stuff, but it was just like they just like, I'm like, I don't know why they treated him like that. I'm like, yeah, his fight is actually kind of cool because like the Destiny isn't like nearly as extra as the Strike Freedom.
Right.
Granted, he does pull out like, because the Destiny had the after image gimmick, it stole it from F90. Again, let's
Yeah,
you see.
yeah.
But the Destinies didn't have mass, and even when like the F91s had mass, all it did was just like mess with the perception of people, like other new types. It didn't actually serve a purpose beyond that. But here, he straight up like pulls out a shadow clone jutsu to kill 3 people at the same time
It's so
with these
crazy.
after images. It was like, I'm like, this isn't what this thing did before. Like,
It was supposed to be like a decoy or like a visual like obfuscation that confuses the enemy. It was never meant to
exactly.
like.
But here he just uses 3 to strike at 3 I'm like, what the fuck? Like,
Oh my god, everything about it doesn't make sense because like all these character arcs are also like not in line with any of the source material, and again, maybe
yeah,
we're taking.
and the way that Atherin stops the brainwashing too, I thought was crazy
Oh
too, because
my
it was
god.
like, and I wrote in my notes, Atherin stops it because he's horny. Citation needed.
Yep.
Because he pictures, like Kigali and like making out with her and whatnot, which is like funny because like this dude went like had like throughout the entirety of Sea Destiny, he was getting hit on by like everyone and their mother, and he didn't show an ounce of like he didn't show discomfort, he didn't show care, he showed nothing. But
Right.
now his key to victory is the fact that he is a thirsty dude.
He's thirsty for his wife, which is it's so corny it hurts.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with Shin too, because I think Shin's whole shtick is that he was too angry to ever think rationally for the situation he was in. And it's like, what,
Sure.
now that Destiny's over, he's like getting his ass whooped every like compass mission he's in. It just everything doesn't make sense. And
Well, the way they portray it, like with the Compass missions, is like other than that one fight that they lose, they just show that like everyone else besides Kira is useless. Mostly because he just goes in on his own and beats everything. But it's just like, again, it's like, how is this supposed to work? Like he's not despite the fact that, again, like you have like all these weapons that like you'd think like I guess in this timeline, in the first war, we did sort of just buy the idea that like deterrence isn't a thing. We'll just like wipe each other out. Whoever gets to strike first. But here it's just weird where the way they portray it, where it's just like, okay, you've got like Compass as basically the celestial being analog from Double O, but
yeah,
they are like they're simultaneously way more powerful. It feels like. I mean, I guess the the Gundams were pretty powerful compared to anything else in that timeline, but they don't seem like effective in their role at like accomplishing anything. It's just like, oh yeah, like conflicts keep happening. And yeah, like, and the fact that too, like that they can get away with doing everything. Like I was thinking too, like when you were talking about it, it's like, why were either Messiah or Genesis or Requiem, sorry, why were either of those allowed to just like still sit around in this timeline?
Exactly. None of it adds up. And it's speaking on like the politics of this setting, right? Factions exist just to exist. Their actual motives are irrelevant, aside from causing chaos. And it's the same thing with like all these like garbage super weapons that are sitting around. In UC, it's always something like some corrupt Federation official cut the funding bill to get rid of it, and then Xeon finds it and is like, "Hey, I got an idea." But here
Well,
it's just
and a
like it was
lot of
just
that
sitting free to
too.
use.
Yeah, and like I think like they did say there was like maybe it was in like a novel, like the light novel or whatever, because I was reading on some stuff and it was like apparently like the military director was supposed to shut it down but just didn't. And it's like, why are you going through official channels when you're like
The Zaft
okay with
one
just
or the
yeah, the Zaft one. But it's like, why are you okay? Like, why are you going through official channels when you're otherwise okay with just like we have this organization that just shows up and kills bad guys?
and this is where I'm
Like,
thinking
why
about
not
this
just why not just dismantle these things?
because what you have there, if you just focus on that particular Zaft official, right? You can just have a movie about them trying to deal with this like Zaft corruption and these rogue
Sure.
elements in Zaft that are trying to revive these ancient super weapons, right?
Instead, they're just like there as like, oh hey, like we need grunts on like the bad guys' side because they just nuked their whole fucking country. So,
Exactly.
so they need
Exactly.
replacement.
Well, and it wasn't like they at a point the grunts are all just like drones.
Yeah, because they've got like on the actual foundation side, they have their own like dins and gens, but they just have like weird like drone heads. And
It's
again,
so
I think the
weird.
reason for that is just like because our main characters, especially especially Kira, because what he pilots is like just the machine of wanton destruction, but he doesn't like to kill people supposedly. So they have to give him, like, well, all right, well, if they're drones, they can just die and there's no real like mortal consequence here.
Literally, that is the case. It's like, and this is why I keep falling back on like Kira being this stand-in for American interventionism in like a Samantha Power lens, right? Because everything he does is always free of sin in some way, and you can
Yes.
maybe make that a commentary on like Protestant ethics or whatever, or like how America can selectively defend some of its worst actions. But
Yeah.
violence is always a contrivance in Cosmic Era, not a reality or not something that is
Mhm.
unavoidable. And when you tie that in with like the whole Three Ships Alliance conception in this world, or how the respective factions, so like the Earth Alliance and the Plants or Zaft. First of all, nations don't make sense in this world. How do you have this neutral kingdom of Scandinavia and Destiny? How does Foundation pop up out of nowhere? Like it seems like you can just pay a $5 license and start your own country in this world, which I got ideas. But but
Well, yeah,
um
that's what I was saying. Like, there's too many factions in this universe. Like, Universal Century. I remember like people complaining that like Z was complex because you had like 4 groups by the end of it.
But that still makes sense because it's like court
Yeah.
intrigue. It fits a model of conflict that like storytelling has already been done about, and is there's enough examples from history and fiction that you can draw from that you can still keep it fresh, but it's recognizable. This
Yes.
makes no sense whatsoever because like a faction is introduced and then their goals don't make sense. Like I'm thinking about the Destiny plotline where like two orb senators somehow take over the government and force Kigali to
Yeah,
a
into that
very
weird arranged marriage.
the weird arranged marriage plot they were doing, right? It's just like, who are these guys? How the fuck did they pull that one off? And
Well, and then like Orb is like even more complicated because like the villains from at least the early parts of Astray are from there.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
so like it's just like, and it's just weird. Like I mean, it's just weird. Like you've got Orb as like, okay, it's this independent nation that's like super powerful. Foundation just steals its whole flow. Bar for bar, just they're bad.
yep.
Like actually bad, not just like there's some bad people there. You have Compass. I forgot this was technically Othran and Marin are in Terminal, a different group. Um,
Oh my
so why not?
god.
Zaft and Plant, which are like the same thing, but why is there two names? And why are they all capped?
It's so weird because like
Um,
I guess the plants are the space colonies, and then Zaft is their military branch. It's supposed to be like the Warsaw Pact. That's like calling the entire Soviet forces the Warsaw Pact. It doesn't make sense.
yeah. The Zaft coup d'etat faction, they're listed as a different faction on the wiki.
Oh
Which,
my
I mean, I guess they are,
god.
but, like, the thing is, they don't really differentiate that. You know what I mean? They, like, it's a pretty successful coup d'etat. Like, they're like, "Hey, yeah, Lacus, like, screw her. We're in charge now." And everyone besides Izak and Jerka follow suit, right?
Pretty
They're like, other than
much.
2 people in the military, everyone is like, "Yeah, who needs her? Who needs our genetically modified super ruler?" Who
Which
was
it which,
made for this purpose. You have
it's
the Earth
so
Alliance,
insane.
and you have Blue Cosmos on top of that.
Which I don't know. Blue Cosmos just keeps going further and further underground every time their leaders are killed. To the point it's like we joked about them being the Illuminati and Seed Destiny, and it's like, no, they keep coming back and they keep coming back with even more destroy Gundams and like more of their whack more mobile armors and committing war
Yeah,
crimes in cities and
didn't they
stuff.
have like a couple destroys in this?
I mean, yeah, the first battle, and again, like something about
Yeah.
that first battle that's getting me is like the only thing that compares to one hero coming in and like taking down hordes of faceless like grunts is something like a superhero movie or like even a particular style of like a Sentai show, for example. It's very because again there are hype moments in Gundam, but like it's late you see stuff. You see a late stage Char, late stage Amuro come in and take out grunts as they're trying to get to their real target. This
Yeah.
was gratuitous.
Yeah, it's like the gap between like a named character and a faceless in this universe. Insane, right? Like you'll always get like mostly in UC, but there might be a few in some others where you get like those like elevated grunts where people are like, "Oh, hey, like the Stark Jagan pilot from Unicorn,"
Right.
or
The
there's a
Byron custom
couple.
pilot.
Yeah, Violent Custom Pilot in Unicorn. There's a few others. There's the James Gunn pilot in Victory, which is people like pointed out that like this guy like lasted 5 minutes against like the most advanced mobile suit. This thing is like 50 years old.
Yeah,
even though
yeah.
it's a nothing fight in an early episode of Victory, it's just like this guy held his own pretty well.
Oh my
Even if
god,
most of
yeah.
it was off screen. But you have like those elevated grunts. I don't think in any of the like definitely not in this movie, but I don't think in anything else you really have like where it's like, oh hey, like remember that like that one random Jin pilot who gave Kira some trouble in an episode. Like
Yeah.
it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's pretty much like if they ever fight anybody longer than like a single blow, it's a named character and it's always like a rival or a villain of the week. It's never. Whereas something in like Victory, right? Like you have Uso fighting for his life against like privates in the Zanskar military,
Yeah.
which again it feels a lot more grounded in that sense. But I mean, just again, everything about it just seems very cold, impersonal, and forced. None of the characters seem to be particularly going anywhere. Even in like the initial runs of like Seed, right? There are these like warm like friend moments between like Kigali, Othrin, and Kira towards like the latter third. But here it's just like everything is forced. We only know about these characters because we've seen the past couple episodes. And then I think like down to the just the depictions of all these relationships. The worst singular scene in this film has to be Orphe trying to force himself on Lacus. And it's the single most uncomfortable scene in the movie. Like it's like he fails at it. Lacus kind of like gives an everybody clapped speech, which is like it's so dehumanizing to actual survivors of this kind of stuff, but it's also like the perfect distillation of how people act in this world, that I can only compare this to like Sorkin level stuff. This is like the West Wing of Gundam. Like people are always going into like 3-minute diatribes on freedom and justice and always talking about vague principles.
And I think it was more, and isn't she like more so like kind of rebuking him for like ideological reasons, not that he's like trying to get her?
Yeah. It's just it's the most Sorkin style writing. Which is again why I say this is like the Fukuyama era of Gundam. Like
yeah, and I guess that is fair, like when you like frame it like that, because it's like it's so much of these characters like in this movie, like they're less characters and more so just vehicles for like different ideologies, and it's not handled that interesting. Especially because the villains, like it kind of just boils down to like I put that like one of the major themes in which we didn't even talk about yet was just like that incels are bad. Like
I agree, but like you gotta like flesh it out. You can't just like you can't tell us someone's an incel and not get into the specifics of like why that's misanthropic, what that worldview inspires this insane person to do, and why they need to be stopped, and why our heroes are different or similar, like.
Yeah, I think I'll read off just that whole paragraph that I wrote.
Yeah.
This is probably a good time to talk about the films. Again, I wrote this like the night of like leaving the theater, which was already a late film.
Still holds up. Yeah. Still holds up.
This is I was just kind of giving a sense of like these were like immediate thoughts. The major film, as it's central to almost all of the characters, incels are bad. While Kira struggles with what often feels like involuntarily in a sexual relationship, not in an inappropriate way. Our villains are pretty much all firmly incels and are either motivated by being an incel or integrally defined by being an incel. Our turncoat and latest affirmation that Pseudo Fukuda despises redheads, Agnes Gibaranth just wants the D. But not just any D would do. She needs herself a real quality man. So she wants Kira until he pretty firmly asserts that he'll never give her the time of day, even if he thinks he's being totally cocked at that very moment. So she falls into the arms of Shura Serpenti. Again, these names. And his low-tier flirting that would... I don't... said in that movie, but this description. And his low-tier flirting that would convince the town that even he has gay. I'm trying to remember what he said. I remember it was just like such a shitty come on, and she just like fell and like decided to like betray the good guys. all for that.
And they would probably say that like they were inspired by like the different I forget what this character's name was in Zeta, but like she meets Sirocco and like she falls for him, but Sirocco is like an evil new type who like manipulates people and uses this charm to like...
Are you talking about Sarah or Rekawa?
I think Rekawa. So Rekawa,
Rekawa defects, but also someone like they... And the protagonist focused more on the fact that it was that like Quattro Char neglected her.
Yeah.
Because there's even like the thing where like the cactus plant that he gave her, like he's like, oh, it's like blossoming, which it only does if you neglect it and don't you don't hydrate it properly and whatnot.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, like this is Shirako has like powers. And he's not even... There's no evidence that this guy was his magical powers on her in that moment.
No, it was more like he's just a manipulative person. That's how I always saw it.
Yeah. Orphe Lamtau, again, the names. The main antagonist and key figure in the NTR plot storyline primarily wants to enact the Destiny Plan, but the vast majority of the time he's trying to seduce, complaining about his failure to seduce, or attempting to molest Lacus. His entitlement to her is rooted in being a real Ubermensch specimen as an Accord, and so he's basically better than Kira in every way, as the latter can't even bring about world peace. We can't even accomplish world peace is legitimately a card Orphe pulls to demonstrate Kira is a seedless lover and actually an underdog this time. The other major claim Orphe has to Locke's is that they are slashed out siblings. And then I was like, they've been created to lead and enact the destiny plan and shepherd the race into the future. Yep, that's just a juicy little retcon. Lacus Klein is even G-saucier than her beloved Kira, who can truly do no wrong. The only one and only apple of her eye, light of her life, heart's desire, honey bunch, etc. And was apparently genetically bred to be the leader of all humanity. Whether the fact that the girl has had 3 coups thrown on her is a bug or feature of this state-of-the-art eugenics program to create the ideal supreme leader, steal the hearts and minds of all people, is a question left to her creator, I guess. Agnes and Orphe also get caught up in the rivalries with the protagonists over the deservedness of their affection. Agnes taunts Luna Marie for having to settle for a lesser man in the Shin. Orphe insists Kira, too, is the lesser of not only himself, but Lacus, too. Of course, both couldn't be more wrong. In this setting, it's unfathomable that any lesser of a woman. Oramaha Kyber, the queen of the Foundation, and overarching antagonist of the movie, had to use science to create her own Ubermensch children, rather than giving birth to them, and seemingly de-aging herself 20 to 30 years, but no one mentioned that. So she's at least an honorary incel, too. Apparently, according to the light novel, she had created these anti-aging drug to fund Foundation, and there was a lab accident, and she got a bunch of it on herself, and that's why she's de-aged, which is stupid. I don't know why they insist, like, other than Blue Cosmos, everyone in this setting has to have some, like, weird, tragic bend to their backstory. I don't get it. I don't find it that tragic either.
Yeah, it's weird that Blue Cosmos is the perfect villain. It's like,
yeah,
they're Illuminati Nazis.
Racist.
You can kill them. It's like fair enough. You're right. They are the worst, but it's like these guys are also equally monstrous. Like, why are we supposed to sympathize here? Here's everything about the way like these relationships, especially between men and women, are written. I don't know if Shinzo Abe had a role in this before his untimely passing. Because it's very much giving like, okay, all right, go back and get those birth rates up. It's really giving that. But nothing is so unhinged.
It's kind of the way that's been talked about in the West a lot, right? With like the focus on like from like Elon Musk, Charlie Kirk, and people like that, where like the idea of like, oh, like birth rates are low because like women aren't like putting out, basically. Where it's like it's all like the onus is all on like the women are at fault here. It's that they're aborting your baby. You know, everything is about the
right. And it's like, I mean, if we can be real for a second, right? Is it always is this weird responsibility of the dating experience of people to somehow form and set the standards for how they talk about gender relations, period. And you see that probably not just in the entire West, but like especially in the United States, like people are taking their dating experiences to absurd extremes. I mean, especially I can only speak about my context as a man, right? To like justify like femicidal views, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think people really understand how that mentality factors into what they are immediately victimized by, in their view, is that women resent men for this kind of approach. And there can always be this idea that people are overstating the case, you know, they're projecting their personal experiences onto strangers, yada, 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 yada. But there is something to be said about how, like, the political right globally has exploited male alienation along gendered lines and has folded it into this weird, like, obsession with demographics. And it plays out again in like nerddom for whatever reason, because it's a male dominated space. I don't know, but to this end, right? It leads to this idea that because women are somehow inherently and fundamentally different than men, um, you can never fully understand people. So it's like a completely antagonistic relationship, even in a partnership with a woman, which is insane. And then what
Right.
it just creates this like weird standard of like morality for women as a display and performance to men. And we can talk about that in the context of patriarchal societies. I'm only going to speak about it in the context of the United States. I'm not going to speak on behalf of Japanese culture, right? But if you just apply something sci-fi like Gundam to that lens, it's very insane for like Lacus to be kidnapped against her will, come to the realization that she's been not only manipulated but quite literally MK Ultra, right?
Yeah.
Just like got like was able to berate in Sorkin style like dialogue, a would-be assaulter, and then proceeds to be fan service to get into the
Yep.
jetpack for the Mighty Strike Freedom. And again, there's just something like we've talked about how like this is Gooner like mode 100% in this movie. There's something that's always been funny to me about this style of anime where when needed, all the female characters are stick thin. That's their like standard of beauty. Suddenly, when the angle changes or when the situation requires it, voluptuousness exists only at the breasts and ass.
Yes.
I don't know which person looks like that in real life, and I'm not trying to do a body positivity like discourse on this.
We're
I'm just
trying to
saying that
find
like,
out. No, just kidding.
well, I'm just trying to say like, there's something that's like so goonerific. I don't have
Oh
another
yeah.
term for it, right? Where it's like it's not even grounded in fundamental human sexuality or like just the artistic desire to depict the human form. So what you're left with is just like these weird, suddenly sexual shots right after a really uncomfortable scene. And then she's basically like hugging up on Kira the entire time for that final fight. Actually,
Yeah.
not even that. No, like she's literally like in like skin tight, skimpy, super suggestive pose for like the viewer's benefit, which
Yep.
I'm gonna be completely honest. I was kind of made uncomfortable by it. Not that
Yeah, it's like one of those things where like when you're out in public, like watch, I don't know, I'm kind of decent stuff, and there's some stuff like occasion this was a bit much, but like when you're seeing it in a theater, it's just like, ugh, like yeah, like it just really kind of highlights like the sheer like kind of grossness of it.
yeah, and it's like again, like I don't try to be like a prude about all this stuff, and again,
Yeah,
like there is like something as protesting too much to seem like something revealing. Like I agree with that, but this was just like absurd and like it. This is the stuff about CE that people don't like. Is it feigns to have all the deep ideas and concepts of UC and fundamentally bastardizes them to the extent that it's profitable to do so. As long as it's getting eyeballs, go for it. And I don't know because like that's really all that can be said about it. Is like okay, that's kind of gross, but it does mean that's like okay, what purpose do these characters serve other than to progress the plot from point A to point B to point C, pilot the mechs, and provide fan service if they're female?
yeah, and like kind of on the relationship side too. It's just like I just like like one of the things that stood out to me is it's like yeah, I'm rating on like the incel stuff too, but it's like Kira's also like a really shitty lover. Like, he's kind
Yeah,
of just like a bad character in this movie as a whole. Like, I just like he just whines and mopes about how he can't cause world peace, about how he's getting cocked, about like like there's like nothing until like the end where oh I get to have sex. I'm in a good mood. But like
as soon as they like again, she just survived like one of the most horrifying ordeals of her life. They get to Earth and immediately start fucking on
she's
the beach.
she's probably survived that same ordeal like in every other series. It's Cosmic Era.
Fair
Um,
enough.
but yeah, like it's just weird and like it's like again it's like that whole beginning of the scene where like the movie where it's like it's showing like in any normal movie this would be like okay like this is like a source of conflict that like there's this sheer neglect that he is putting into this relationship, right? Because he is fixated on a million other things, because he refuses to like make anyone else or let anyone else step up and do anything. They lampshade this several times in the movie on that first battle when he like just like curb stomps people. Shin complains about it, and they're just like, well, you know, that's Kira for. And like they don't portray it ever as like a bad thing because he doesn't change really. It's just that like, oh yeah, well like Locus has got a second to have sex on the beach. Let's do that. But after this, like you know, it's like again like that whole sequence. Like I get that he's busy and has stuff to do, but so does she. She runs this entire organization. She runs a fucking nation. She probably has more important stuff to do than he does, especially when he's not needed for half the things.
Right. Oh my god.
But it's this like sheer like weird inequality where yeah, she has to be the dutiful partner, but he's just doing nothing. Like it's like he's living the male fantasy, right? You know, men only want one thing, and it's fucking disgusting. Like the ability to just, you know, call on their partner when they want them and exclusively then. I guess. Like I don't know. Like that it just felt like that it was this weird and again, you know, you've got the, you know, Boxum babe, you know, in his arm killing the bad guys, like just, you know, it's like it just feels like it's catering to a very weird fantasy like depiction of like how these relationships should work.
It definitely is. Like it just what people appreciate about UC is this commitment to the idea of real robot. Where yes, there are like these metaphysical sci-fi elements that kind of break the mold, but it's praised for this somewhat grounded idea of like an arms race for the sci-fi technology, that there's sci-fi elements that play into how you suspend your disbelief, that the politics at play in the universe drives the conflict and it mirrors, if not events in our world, events that make sense for the world the story is being told in.
Well, and real quick too on the arms race thing, a lot of that, especially like it really comes to a head in Unicorn, is that it's like manufactured by corporations.
Yes.
Right, that like there's it's very clear that like there's, you know, not necessarily like this new world order conspiracy thing, but there's entrenched interest in that timeline that want conflict to persist, that are profiting off of conflict persisting.
Right. It's very grounded in that sense. And it's like you can talk about whether it's because the team that worked on UC in its early ages were involved with the student lefts in their time in some way or the other. You can talk about it being just of a higher standard of writing. You can chalk it up to the unique vision of the writers. But it is a fantasy only in the sense that like the world that it takes place in doesn't exist. This, on the other hand, plays into, and I guess this comes up in like superhero film discourse, right? About like what is the story being told here other than like a pure power fantasy. And if you look at it, right, like how these relationships between characters are written, how conflict between heroes and villains works, where there's objectively quote unquote good and bad heroes in these worlds. Whereas in UC it was opposite factions and complicated individuals fighting in them. And then when you take it down to like how these mobile suits are set up, right? The literal mechs that are like the functional selling point of this whole thing. The whole reason people come to watch this, if it's 70% personal conflict and 30% mech fights, they're here to see the mech fights. You know, there's whole scenes in UC where like the Gundam runs out of beam shots and Amuro's in deep shit and he has to figure out how he's going to get out of this situation. These mechs are like armed to the teeth and don't even use their full armaments in any given engagement. The kits that they come in, like the merch that's being sold, the real profit making engine here, right? Loaded to the brim with accessories and optional parts.
And for like this movie, like at least the Mighty Strike Freedom probably under equipped compared to its in-universe depiction.
Which again, like discussions on power scaling can just feel like kid in the comic book store arguing type of stuff. But
Yeah.
I mean, like I think you said this in your review, right? It's like the Mighty Strike Freedom is just the most overpowered thing they've come up with.
Yeah, like it amalgamate. I mean, as much as the Strike Freedom already did, this amalgamates even more stuff. All for the sake of just being like, really cool and overpowered. Like the fact that it has a metal katana, which is like, again, like the only, like, why would something in this universe have a metal katana? You got to read a Stray for that. But like the fact that it's there is like, it's just defined like rule of cool, right? It makes no sense for them to have it on top of everything else, but it's, rule of cool. And it's, there's so much like rule of cool like dictating so much in Seed that it kind of like becomes less cool as a result, right? Where it's like you can't picture these characters in a conflict anymore where they would actually, struggle. Even in this movie when they struggle, it's like, okay, well, like the Rising Freedom Gundam, which is what he's using at the start of the movie, just looking at that thing, you're like, oh, this is worse than the Strike Freedom by like a long shot. They're handicapping themselves just to, make a conflict, work. Um, so it's just really bizarre to me.
And it's just like, I don't know, we've talked about like the wasted potential of things like Seed and Seed Destiny, but this being like the capstone of Cosmic Era and not something like Stargazer or Astray right now, is kind of proof that like you can't re-engineer something that was a product of its time. So I'm talking about UC in this case specifically, right? You can't re-engineer it and rewrite it and expect the magic to work all over again. Which is, I think, where things like G-Quux, for example, are somewhat showing their hand, but in like a more honest way of we can't really play with the source material here, so we're going to imagine an alternate history and what the
I will say,
implications of.
I know we've talked about this off stream, but I will say tonally, I do feel like Quux is actually one of like the closest things I've ever seen to like kind of
Oh, I
recapture
agree.
the
I
retro.
agree. I agree. But I guess what I mean is like they know that like they can't just rewrite how everything works. They can't
Sure.
come in and drop new elements. They of course are coming in with like different plot points and ideas, but it's still rooted in all the same things. And something like Cosmic Era tries to just rewrite the slate and make all the same magic moments come up, right? So whether it's like Stella getting killed by the Destroy Gundam as like a clear nod to four,
Yeah.
um not being saved by Camille and Seda, right? Or if it's like that moment in Seed Destiny where he's tearing up all the goof units and you have that ZAF commander being like, how did he destroy all these in 5 minutes? As a clear nod to like that one scene in Encounters from Space. You can reframe and recreate moments. G-Quux did the same thing.
Yeah.
But the payoff comes from other sources. You don't just reframe. And something like Seed Freedom, where it takes this 2004 product, takes probably some of the best some of the best technology and resources to recreate itself in 2024. There's something really cool about that, in that they took this long dead or long forgotten aesthetic and vibe and they brought it back probably the same way that I'm not saying this as praise. I'm saying this as like someone who's terrified of what they saw. In the same way that G-Quux or Unicorn can kind of make you feel the same warmth you felt from these really poignant moments in
Sure.
Universal Century, this brings back all the things you hated and were frustrated by in Cosmic Era. And
Yeah.
there's something very like, again, like there's something technically proficient about that you do want to
Yeah.
give your hats off to the creators. Like, yeah, you guys did pull that off. That is like really cool that you did that, but you didn't improve upon what you built, and that's the
Right.
big shame in this.
Right. And like, kind of going off, part of that too is like I don't, you just said like the cosmic era is kind of a lot of wasted potential. I don't really feel that with this, to be honest. Like I know we've like and this isn't like me taking a one how I've, kind of lamented most features of I didn't have high expectations at all. This was very much like but I think like seeing it in its full practice, right? This was very much like cash grab. This came out. I don't know if it necessarily aligned with Seed anniversary or not. Um, it had been 20 years, I think, ish since like Seed Destiny had ended. Um, so like that was kind of like the big thing for it, and it's interesting because like Gundam is like put, oh hey, like there's these anniversary, but like nothing else is getting treated remotely good, right? Last year was G Gundam's anniversary, I believe, and all it has to show for it is a barely changed metal build, a real grade kit, a high grade, and
Hmm.
some weird prose story, and that's it. Um, you know, Gundam Seed got this whole line, right? And from what I've heard, all the kits are really good for. And I do like a lot of the mobile suit designs. I again like we kind of and it's like I hate like saying that like oh yeah I think the Black Knight stuff doesn't really look very good just because it's like this is like the one like innovative like aesthetic that they've got in the movie or really the whole series, right? But it's like I don't know what they were like doing with those designs. They don't like and the kits like have you ever seen like their capes, like their beam capes?
Yeah, isn't it like a vinyl thing?
Yeah, it looks really weird. Like I don't know why they didn't just do. I'm trying to. I mean, the one thing that had like a beam cape from Geno Reconquista, I don't think ever got a kit. So I'm like, why
Hmm.
didn't they just do what they did with that? I'm like, well, that didn't come out. They made a weird choice with that, and it's just in general, I feel like there was a lot of weird choice. Some of the aesthetics in this, I do generally think a lot of the upgrades worse than their prior versions, probably just because, like, again, you're kind of just reiterating the same thing. Doing so eventually just kind of leads to a sort of, oversaturated design. But yeah, it's just such a weird. This is a weird experience. Came out. It did very well in Japan. I think it did decently well here too. As I said, it's getting a prequel series to show that the cash cow is alive and well. I have no, to be honest. Like there's no you obviously if it's a prequel you can't top that. So I just don't know what they do.
And it is weird that like the mainline series is getting resurrected when I think a lot of that energy could be channeled into something like, I don't know, an Astray adaptation or an Eclipse adaptation. I think people want to know where this timeline went instead of following up with Kira Yamato directly.
Yeah, like I don't know. I mean, it's kind of that problem that we have with Star Wars and whatnot, right? That like
Yes, yes.
um, because like for me growing up, I was always an EU fan, so like I knew there was all these books. I read a lot of them
Right.
growing up. So to me, like like when the Skywalker saga, which is like again a Disney label that that it wasn't what we called it before the last movie. Um, but like people like complain where it's like, oh, why? It's like Star Wars was never just like about this one family for me, and even still, like, there's plenty of side content that they put out that's not about that. But like in terms of the main stuff that people pay attention to, because it gets the most money, all that stuff, all the resources. It's very insularly focused on kind of singular characters, and it's you know Kira has always been one of the more decisive protagonists anyways. So like it makes the choice even stranger, but I just think like especially at this point it's like I don't like I like as much as like yeah, like this movie when I watched it, I was like, there's a lot of stuff here that it just doesn't make sense. It's a horrible point of entry. Like I couldn't fathom watching this without watching Seed and Destiny. Um, and maybe you'd be fine without Destiny. Well, no, because the whole Destiny plan thing. But like without watching that, I couldn't imagine this being your point of entry. And
Yeah.
just like all of that, it's like I don't know, this was very fundamentally for a certain, and it just feels like that was exclusively what this was for. And I don't know what a prequel is going to solve. Because again, like the stuff that I said, like didn't really make a lot of sense. They explained it in the novelization or whatever, but like it also wasn't stuff that I thought like needed. Like it's like I don't care. Like main antagonist looks like a little girl. I just assume it's another fetish, right? Like that's at the end of the day, I just assume that that's probably the case. I just think it's weird that they showed a picture of her when she was, but then oh no, gotta explain all. Like no, you don't. I don't need to know who these Black Knights are. I got enough of them in this movie, and they all die anyway, so it's not like there's any meaningful like oh wow, like I really got invested in this character. I wonder what they're gonna do next.
It's also just like it's so obviously ham-fisted in, right? Like
Yeah.
it's like someone like Tramon Durandal himself is already a shoehorned in character. And they at least, take the pains to do a couple filler episodes where him re-narrating the plot is him inserting himself into the story. And you have these like staged conversations between him and Le Creuset. When even it's pretty clear that like Le Creuset was a pretty complete villain in his own right. You didn't need to do all that. So, where am I going with this? It's like when you add yet another layer of villains who were in on the same conspiracy and we just didn't find out about them until today, I can get where that's useful for you as a storyteller, where it's like, well, we need to extend the story. You can just make a new villain. You can make a new villain that's, inspired by the past conspiracy. You don't have to make a new element. And if you're adding a new element to a conspiracy, it should be something like Durandal and Le Creuset didn't even know we were around doing this. That at least makes sense to me. It's the same way where it's like, what do you mean Palpatine was on this forgotten planet with all of these like hidden Sith and was like in a back to tank this whole time?
And most of the and for side tangent, most of the things that have explained that have made it even worse, in my opinion, in terms of suspension of disbelief.
Right. It's it's just of all the things to have done, like if it was just a new set of villains that were like external to that whole thing, that would at least be refreshing. But then being like we were involved with that the whole time, then it's like, so where were you guys when shit hit the fan for the villains last time? And
Right.
moreover, it's like, so what? You were setting up the fake country of Foundation, getting all these labs and all this infrastructure set up with the full knowledge that in 20 years you were going to blow it up.
Right. Like it's like it's like one of those plans that like involves like, all these moving pieces that happen to do exactly what they needed to happen. But your plan still fails because there was probably a way more efficient way to do it, right? Like it doesn't make a lot of sense, and it just like I don't know what you can flesh out to make it make like there's nothing that I don't think there's anything that they can flesh out that would be like, oh wow, like now I understand. Especially because like we all know that they're just pulling shit out of their ass at this point, anyways. You've had a couple extra years to think about, it, but it's just regardless, it just doesn't like strike me as appealing in that sense, right? And you're absolutely right. The way the villains were integrated inherently just felt like an ass pull. And I get that it's difficult to like, at a certain point with an extended universe, it gets difficult to create new conflicts and whatnot. I get that, but that's also at the point maybe it's time to move on.
Exactly. And whether you use the same world or not, is a second to that, but it's like, you know, Kira's story has been told 3 times now, and all times uh he's a Mary Sue, basically, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to tell that story 3 times, and this is for the same reason why something like Astray, Eclipse, or again Stargazer just continues to be my favorite cosmic era
Sure.
artifact, just because
It's
it
easily the
does.
most accessible too.
It's the most accessible, and also like it takes all the aspects of the setting at its most serious and doesn't overstay its welcome.
Yeah.
And it has a very short, like it's basically 45 minutes in total, right? Or
Yeah.
something like that.
I think that's about right.
Right. And it manages to tell such a deep story with just how short of a story it is. So it's not at a point you can even say that the setting's not the problem. That the assumptions of the world aren't even the problem. It's
Right.
who your characters are and how you tell them, and maybe having a couple sick mobile suits, also, helps out a
Yeah.
lot. And it's not to say that like, the mecha designs fell short. You'd say that like Seed is probably one of the strongest in that aspect. You have like the best of UC style design with like that 2004 twist. The striker packs were very strong in that
Yeah.
sense. You have, and again, like I really like the initial Zaf designs a lot more, like the Siju,
Sure.
the Dins. A lot of these, or even like the Providence, are their own original designs, and they look great. They're villainous and imposing in their own right.
Yeah, then they really homogenized it in Destiny onwards. And not even just like, okay, an actual Zaku now. There's just something that like feels a little bit more flat. Like even like, the successor to the Promise, the Legend. It just doesn't, it doesn't hit the same way.
And again, it's like here we are with the Fukuyama era Gundam, where it's like history has ended. Here we are looping over and over again. And like what made the first Zaku so interesting conceptually, right, is that it's still like hyper primitive mobile suit technology. It's still using bullets as opposed to beam weapons. It has like this really wonky design for its camera that gets replaced by a 360 view later on and all this stuff, right? The world builds on itself. And then instead what you're doing is this soulless invocation as a peace offering to the UC fans, but you're putting it at like a late stage where hyper powerful beam weaponry already exists. It's not even close to being the Zaku of like the UC. It's just a generic grunt weapon with beams on
Yeah.
it. Anyhow. I guess I did have a joke, and I kind of really made it at the start already, but it's like, would Compass be inherently useful in the geopolitical situation we find ourselves in? I don't know. But something about the storytelling decisions in Seed, in all its iterations, and particularly in this movie, serve to represent various libidinal and ideologically flawed fantasies, whether it's the bare bones attempt at a relationship and how you relate to women, whether it's having hyper powerful tools at your disposal that let you wipe away your enemies like a superhero, or whether it's that liberal interventionism works 100% of the time. Who's to say? But it's very much a product of a 2004 worldview that like was kind of souring when it existed, and it's it's like looking at Joe Biden right now. You don't know how it's holding up.
Been a minute since he's been in the public light.
They just dropped the cancer announcement, and then he's been gone. Like,
Yeah, which was weird because like in the lead, I don't know. I don't know if I want to get into full conspiracy, but in the lead up to, he was like doing all the rounds, right? The
yeah,
apology, it wasn't really my fault tour. And then like I don't know if it was just like, oh, this did horribly. Let's just have cancer and then disappear. I
Oh my
don't know.
god.
The timing was weird. Like I don't know. It was just like, oh shit, this isn't working. Let's my last bout at sympathy.
Just like Seed Freedom. Oh my god. I don't know where else to go with this. Like I'm even surprised they're going to do a prequel to this. I'm just at a complete loss. Um I guess maybe we'll just go with the superlatives. Who was the most annoying character in this one?
Oh, um, I might just have to go with Kira.
I would agree. I think I remember
He's the
like
POV,
everyone in the
like
theater breathed a visible sigh, or sorry, an audible sigh of relief when Atherin slapped the shit out of him. Like everyone in the theater was like,
yeah,
"Yes."
yeah. I think that was accurate.
I would tend to agree with you there. Favorite mobile suit design in this movie?
Um, so this is more so maybe on the model kit side.
Okay.
I think the Destiny Spec 2, because maybe it looked like this in the movie. I don't recall though, because I thought it was just the same colors. But in the kit form, it's kind of this gray that's maybe a little closer to the Legend, and I think it
Yeah.
really like adds a spice to that suit. And like the Zeus silhouette stuff is cool, even if it for like a second.
Yeah, no, I think it was like a darker gray tone. I remember that. For my money, I'm going with the Murisame just because like it is such a blatant Zeta ripoff.
Oh, and then, like because it's the Morasame Kai now, and it's yeah, they took it even like further. Um, especially like the Wave Rider jet mode. I don't know what's explicitly MA mode, I guess. Yeah, the MA mode is like just straight up like I guess a little bit closer to like one of like the jet style like rocket emplacements. But yeah, it is a the Zeta rip off as that it's ever gotten, and I think definitely a lot of these designs I think look better in kit form too because I didn't wasn't overly inspired by it until I saw the model.
Yeah, it's like definitely the designs are geared towards like the hobbyists, and I haven't built any of these. Don't I don't think any of them really spoke to me, so I don't know if I'm gonna get to one of these newer Cosmic Era kits
It
sooner or
doesn't
later.
help
But
that I think you own like I mean I know like most of them are updated kits still, but like I think you own like literally all of the
no, you're right. You're right because
main
it's like I
suits
already
in the
have
earlier
like
form.
the what is it? Not the is it the Infinite Justice or it's
Yeah,
the
it's
yeah.
the
So I already have the Infinite Justice from like the initial remaster. I have the Strike Freedom remaster and then the Destiny remaster, and all they did was just give them
yeah,
somewhat of a remold and like a reprint with like new
yeah.
accessories. So I didn't see the point, and then like a bunch of like the classic seed mobile or sorry the seed model kits are so like out of date like in terms of like how much effort you need to
Right.
put into like painting them that like I just put the work in and painted them. I don't want to do it again, you know.
Yeah, well, and there was that had come up too because of the Gelgoog myths that like it's it's one of the cooler takes on the Gelgoog admittedly. And people are
Mhm.
like, well, it's the Gelgoog Jaeger basically. Yeah, but the Gelgoog Jaeger's kit came out at like the dawn of time.
Right,
So
right.
like, good luck making that thing, presentable. Um,
Yeah, which like for the modelers listening to this, like definitely getting an older kit is a good way to like learn a lot of those painting and like scribing skills if that's something you want to get into. But like if you're new to this, just start with the newer stuff. You do not have to torture yourself like that.
yeah. I mean, some of them are like they're easy builds. It's just that it's the presentation. Some of them don't even necessarily have the stickers to like really color correct either.
Right, right. And it's like if you don't know like how to paint or you don't have those equipment and like you can learn a lot of really weird skills like you can use Sharpies and then erase around the edges to get them in the lines you want. But that's still like a degree of learning skill and like I kind of just picked all this up from like having to self isolate for COVID, so I picked up some of those skills doing that. But it's if you've never done this kind of stuff before, it's tough. And like I know a lot of people do modeling as a hobby as a form of stress relief, and then when you have to like paint and scribe by hand, you've just added like all the stress you were trying to remove. It's interesting. But if it is the kind of thing you're into, like, try your luck with an older kid. It's probably cheaper, and like you can definitely practice your hand at that. And as always, get a little acetone, you can wipe off the excess, you're fine. Actually, not acetone, rubbing alcohol. Holy shit, acetone will melt your kid. Don't do that.
I was like,
Holy
really?
shit. My bad. No, acetone is like basically what the putty is when you want to glue parts. It'll just melt the edges, and then you can kind of force them together. But it melts the plastic. Rubbing alcohol will pretty much dissolve almost any paint you put on it, whether it's like Sharpie ink, Gundam marker, or whatever. I'm trying to think. So we did most annoying character, favorite mobile suit. Um, I can't say I had a favorite fight in this one either.
I mean, just kind of that last like hodgepodge, I guess. I mean, as I said, it's the like power scaling at its most absurd, but like everything earlier in the movie is kind of just like an edit, like especially like that middle fight. The camera just like cuts so much between things to make it like kind of give you the illusion of a lot of stuff happening, and it's
Yeah.
just so frustrating to watch. Whereas at least like that final battle, you get the meteor insert song. They went in on the oh hey, look how cool your heroes are.
Right.
They did at least again it's like it there's an aspect of it that definitely falls very shallow, but it's at least cool like that. I guess like if I were to like pick one of the ones in that fight, probably the Destiny versus the 3 Black Knights it was up against. That was probably I'd give that the edge over the Cholera and the Strike Freedom, and then there was the Shiva versus the Infinite Justice. That one was kind of just that was fine. Though also like for our pacifistic protagonist, Athrun does cut that guy in half. So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, the only thing about that battle is just like I don't even think it was like I was enjoying it so much as like I just wanted to see these guys get like cooked. I was done seeing them.
I think so, yeah. Like that was the thing is like as much as like it struggled, like I think Athrun did well. If probably the favorite character in the movie just kind of by default. But the as unlikable as maybe the protagonists were, especially Kira, the villains were just so unlikable. Like, you still wanted to see them die.
Right. Oh my god. Because I like the initial Seed final battle where like Kira is like fighting for his life against like Rusei, like there was so much tension in that fight that like you were kind of watching this on the edge of your seat. This was just like generic hype moment. And I kind of feel like, especially in modern anime, like hype moments are a given. That's like the
Right.
minimum you owe the audience to keep them engaged.
I think that's absolutely correct.
So yeah, I mean, overall, I guess out of 5, what are we giving this one?
I don't know, 1.5 for the aura.
I would probably give this a 2. Yeah, like overall, like I can't say that this is not the technical proficiency needed to accomplish this movie does deserve to be recognized. You had animators and designers like working day and night on this one, so like I think their effort should be recognized among all things. If you like the mobile suits in this timeline, by all means you can probably watch like a clip of just the fights and be done with it.
Yeah.
But especially if you were like a Cosmic Century, or sorry, a Cosmic Era fan, you can prepare to be mystified that 2004 was brought back 20 years into the future, and just upset with what this thing has become. From something that was like an alternate timeline with potential to just the most blatant Bandai cash grab. And there's been several blatant Bandai cash grabs.
That's for sure.
So, what can I say other than I'm really looking forward to the. Hopefully, this is just the season finale of G-Quux and we come back with a new season. I don't know if that's promised, though.
It's not promised, but I don't know. We'll see. I think it'll be interesting episode to review that as well. And I think there's probably like a lot of stuff we can talk about as it pertains to that in terms of like, kind of the change in how anime and shows are like made and like presented now, and how that's kind of influenced things, right? Because like just like this is way shorter than like either Seed shows, and like what is the implication of that? But I think there's a lot
Right.
to talk about in terms of broader trends.
Right, because there's a lot of talk about how like the average Gundam show used to run about 50 episodes, and that was the total run. Maybe you had 20 episodes season 1, 20 episodes season 2, something like that.
Sure.
Trying to do this entire Alt's timeline story in 12 episodes was ambitious. It is a criticism that like the pacing is weird because of that.
Yeah.
But who knows? And again, like there was this meme someone made of like, this is the judgment breaker, and it's like you walk left, absolutely shit. You walk right, absolute masterpiece. Like we're on that precipice.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah, we'll definitely have to talk about how we can look at G-Quux as like a way to adapt an alternate timeline setting, and there probably will be some discussion on how Gundam is handling its extended universe versus Star Wars, for example. I don't know where we'll take it,
Sure.
but should be interesting.
Yeah.
All right. I don't know where else to go with this. Do you have any other final thoughts on this, or?
I think we've kind of exhausted it. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm probably never going to think about this movie again.
You've only had to think about it this long because you've dragged out our review, like of doing this review, so long.
So long. We could finally put it to rest.
Right. Yeah. It can finally, you can rest easy tonight for the first time in over a year.
At long last, our long national nightmare is finally over.
Well, a new national nightmare has just begun, but that's
several national nightmares. I mean,
but
that's.
I was gonna say at least the the parts that you can control are satisfied of frustration in your life.
That much, yes, that much I can agree with. But again, it's just the specter of the Bush era comes back for us all, and whether it was like this, we already talked about this, how like they just shittily invoked weapons of mass destruction, no one bit, and then they were like, who's gonna do anything?
Do it.
Let's just, oh my god.
Like, what if we just force the situation?
And it's so funny that like the opposition is exactly what it was in 2004. This needs to go through Congress. I'm like, oh, we've seen this one. We've all seen this one.
Yeah, it's all we did was swap. We literally just swapped that's all we did. We
swapped Q for N. That's literally what we.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll probably talk about this in a current events episode sometime, but
yeah, probably.
I just the Iran hawks. I was really wondering, like, was Trump willing to be cucked by Israel, or did he want to be cucked by the Iran hawks? And we saw who won there. Everyone.
Yeah, I'm like, it's just like I think it's just it's a confluence of interest, right? Like, just they're all on the same page. Yeah, it's just.
And I just remember, like, at the start of this year, we're like, we really need to change our analysis and views for like these events. And here we are, just like it's like, damn, we have to really change it up again. Like, oh my god.
Yep.
Well, thanks again for tuning in to this one, dear listeners, and thank you for indulging us for another Gundam discussion. We'll keep them coming, folks. Don't worry.
Yeah, for sure.
But until then, please, please stay safe. Look out for your loved ones, and as always, we'll catch you on the next one. Take care.